Sometimes I don't know whether it's better to look at the evening news or read stories online or just try to ignore all of that. Jeff's prayer reminded me of just thinking about some of the stories that are coming out of the attacks in Israel. And there are many social scientists that have concluded that we are entering in an era or age of rage and anger and lack of consideration for other people to a degree that is worse than what we can experience or have seen in recent years. I don't know all of why there does seem to be such a level of tension in both the United States and abroad. I can't say I know all the factors that contribute to why we are seeing greater levels of suicide in this country than we have seen ever before. We are seeing folks who are succumbing to drug addictions and drug deaths at a higher rate than we have ever seen before. And I think part of that is the severity or the strength of some of these synthetic drugs that are out there. They're just, they're horrible. But why are people so angry? Why are there shootings and killings in cities, rural areas? It's everywhere. There's no one that's escaping it in this country. There just seems to be a lot of anger and a lot of inability to deal with anger in any kind of positive way at all. And I think as we've studied this material this quarter, there's all the more need for us to be modeling not just a tolerance for one another, but a true godly regard for other people, a true godly submission to other people. We don't know who we'll be influencing because we'll never know the influence we have. But it's come to the point where you wonder if what you're doing is helping a coworker from getting a gun and creating a mass hysteria situation, or someone entering a school with a weapon. You wonder, how can we be best at bringing down the tension, at bringing down the hostility, and giving people constructive tools in order with which to deal with one another. And we've looked at a lot of that this quarter. It's not enough just to not hurt somebody. It's not enough just to say, I can stand their presence and I could put up with it. It has to be more than that. And we need to be people that are known as those who can make peace with other people, as those who can find ways to be complementary in whatever kind of dynamics in the relationship you find yourself in. Find ways to be the one who is seen as a peacemaker, as one who's seen as considerate and compassionate for others, having empathy, finding ways to connect with people in ways that are appreciated. We're called upon within the church to be able to do things that, we don't have to be in submission to the world. When the world is practicing evil. But there's no less responsibility to be submitting ourselves to those in authority when what they're asking of us is not contrary to God's will. We still have a duty to show a Christ-like spirit in all these things. But at some point, we're going to be the last ones left. the way that the aggression in the world is seeming to accelerate. It's peaking, maybe. I don't know. But maybe we can turn it. There was a book I received about 3 or 4 years ago, and I probably mentioned it before. It's referred to, the book title is Love Your Enemies. And he challenges people to go out and put themselves in situations where they know they're not necessarily welcome, because these are not your people. They are not your kind. They are not your tribe. They are not the ones you typically associate with. Find yourselves opportunities to be among people that are not like you, and model openness, and model kindness, and model an ability to listen. Listen and disagree, but listen. Give people the benefit of the doubt. Don't rush to judgment. Don't rush to conclusions about how people are. But I don't want to live in a hostile world. I don't want to live in a world where I'm in fear of going to the grocery store or going to the local high school. Why are we putting up with this? Why are people putting up with it? Why do we have a society that has this much self-centeredness, that we're tolerating levels of behavior that would have been absolutely shunned in society not that many years ago? It just seems like everyone's getting a free pass to be concentrating on themselves, looking out for themselves. If you cut me off on the road, it's my prerogative to get mad at you and to actually retaliate if I can. And there's a lot of behaviors being modeled that are just, society would have shunned that. Society would have tried to put a stop to it. And I feel like we've become complacent with just how selfish some people are in public. We may have allowed them to be selfish in private, but now we're seeing such public displays of entitlement and selfishness that someone needs to be the world's Bible and display for people a different way to live. How do you live with that much anger and aggression bottled up inside of yourself? I get heartburn too easy for that. It's no wonder people are acting out in such ways without the tools to deal with the conflicts within a person. We're becoming more isolated from one another. Some of us were talking last evening about our neighbors, and we feel like to our chagrin, we feel like we've made an accomplishment if we know our neighbors' names, but we don't know much beyond that. Or maybe we do in some cases. But the sense of community we're losing is part of what gives us this entitled attitude of treating people like they don't matter, of disregarding the people that you live with, that you work with, go to school, see in the grocery store. And if we're not going to be the ones to be the counterculture, I don't know who is. Because it seems to be taking over. It seems to be that we've got individuals who are seen as tough guys. They stand up. Bullying behavior that's in public. Threatening behaviors that are in public. And we're lifting these people up as leaders. And it's hurting us because we think we can behave like our leaders. We think that we are free to be bullying to others. when they disagree with us. Free to use aggression to get what we want. Free to throw a tantrum if you don't get your way. Just we've got to be the ones to change that. And I hope that as we've looked at these things together this quarter, I'm intending to do kind of a wrap up and bounce off all of the prior 12 lessons and just kind of do a summary of the things that are our takeaways that we really want to cement in our minds. This evening I want to start into lesson 12 because I don't think I've managed to do that yet. I think I've said so twice and I don't believe I've got there yet. But encouraging one another and building one another up. Let's look over at 1 Thessalonians 5. 1 Thessalonians 5 and verse 8. Since we are of the day, meaning not the darkness or not the night. In contrast, verse 7. And we're sober and alert, we're not asleep. Since we're of the day, let us be sober, having put on the breastplate of faith and love, and as a helmet, the hope of salvation. So Caleb talked about this equipping of ourselves, Ephesians 5. For God has not destined us for wrath, but for obtaining salvation through our Lord Jesus Christ. You know, I read that and I've always thought God has not destined us for wrath. That's the wrath of God. And I still think that's the proper application of that phrase. But in today's culture, I could also just say God has not destined us for wrath, as in being wrathful people. People that are angry all the time. People that are always trying to get some sort of retribution or payback for something that's been done to them. But I think what this is really saying is we're not destined for God's wrath, but it's salvation through our Lord Jesus Christ, who died for us, that whether we are awake or asleep, we may live together with him. Therefore, encourage one another and build one another, just as you are doing. Encourage one another, build one another. The encouragement that comes from working together. Who wants to tell me a story of work where they needed someone else's encouragement to finish the job? Who's got a memory of some job, some task they had, and if it hadn't been for someone else that came alongside of them, they would have given up? Has anyone got a good memory like that? Let's share. Is Brace being shut down by Ashley if he can't share a memory? Okay, just check. Has anyone got an account like that? We have a brave volunteer. I look forward to hearing this account. Because these things are encouraging.
Okay, so the best thing I can come up with is childbirth. Because it's really nice to have someone there saying, come on, I'm right here, I'm with you. And that, may or may not be a husband, but like Ashley's a doula. That's one of the things that she does. And that's in my experience, that was the hardest thing I ever had to do. So that strikes me that there was encouragement, and even if it was just hand holding, to get me through it.
So that sparks some memory, because I've been in a few delivery rooms, and you watch what's going on and you're amazed at what's happening. And I remember I would cry because Allison was hurting. And I thought, I can't do anything to help her. But yet, She wanted me there to be by her side and give her encouragement. You can encourage people and think you're not getting the job done by just being there. You may not know what to say, but you're there. And you're part of it. You've had that with young ladies who I'm guessing some of them said, I'm done, I'm quitting, I'm giving up. Most of them do, Ashley said. And you're there to say, we're not quitting today. We're going to do this, or you're going to do this. I don't know how if you put it in the collective or not when you say that. You'd have to tell me. But when it comes right down to it, whose strength and whose endurance are you counting on? It's still the mother. It's still the one that's got the job at hand. But just having someone along to say, I know you can do this, and have faith in you to get the job done makes a big difference. Yeah.
This really isn't one where I was, at the end, but I think back over the years in some of the things that we collectively have done, be it, decluttering somebody's house, helping somebody get their houses put back in order and cleaned up, or people that are moving, and you think about those and the amount of camaraderie and team building and relationship development you have, that you would hate to do that alone. Because when you're trying to tackle something like that by yourself, it gets lonely. And it's good to have someone or a group of people with you to help you to keep spirits high and to keep from lamenting what you're doing.
Been in a lot of moves. And sometimes it was the old guys like Herman that got there first. And you remember that. And Gail, I can tell a story on you. We got here and we decided we're going to pave that or reseal that parking lot ourselves. So I marched my kids out at 5:30 in the morning to patch holes and clean and that kind of thing. So we got it all prepped. And then on Saturday morning, and the kids were amazed at you, Gail. You showed up and you worked, but you did it in brand new jeans. We had tar going everywhere, and you were wearing brand new jeans and white sneakers. And the kids were like, well, look at Gail. He's got on his brand new jeans and white sneakers to lay tar. And you did. And we all did. Eat. Go ahead.
Fellow brothers and sisters, for that matter, and just having a great deal of joy while you're working. And I did love it. We'd pour that tar out on that pavement and spread it around, and we had a lot of fun. And I remember, I don't know whether it was Del Murray. No, it was not there. It was who's our brother that's up here in the nursing home up at right inside the boundary of the airport up here. Jerry Drake. Jerry Drake was older than me, and every once in a while he'd come over and he said, I got to take a break. He pulled up one of those chairs that we had, and he sat there, and he'd sit there for 5 minutes or more, take a break, and he'd come right back at it again. It was a joy watching him. And Herman Deckard, there was another one. Herman was older than all of us at that time. And Herman, he worked till I thought he'd drop. He didn't, though. But it was all a joy to work with my brothers.
I remember one of the moves. I don't remember who it was. but we were in the panel van, whatever U-Haul or something that we had, and we rode together. And I don't remember if I drove and he was riding shotgun, or if he drove and I was riding shotgun. But we got to talking as we were going down the road. And I remember that was one of the first chances I really had to get to know just a little bit more about this man that I'd always respected. But some good stories, some good memories. And only Gail can say tar in a parking lot is fun. But I do remember several parts of that day. I remember Dan had the trailer that we had all those barrels on, 5-gallon jugs, whatever, and wrestling those things off. I remember we got the kids to rolling them around the parking lot before we took the cap off to stir them, to mix them, and they thought they were like lumberjacks or something rolling logs. They were having a time doing that. But just people working together. And being able to laugh and tell a story while you're working. Does that get the work done any better? I mean, do you actually work? Maybe you do, but whether it actually applies to the work or not, it makes the day go better. It makes the experience go better, and it makes the willingness to be involved go better. And these are the kind of things that are simple little things, like the parking lot story. Being a doula, that's a little more tense. That's not like laying down some tar on a parking lot. A little more intense, a little more on the line there. But whatever the circumstance, when we can do that with others that are either coaching us along or just working along with us, and you give a pass to when it's an older brother or sister. They may just be kind of standing there and watching and giving you a couple words on how to get this done. They may not be, sweating as hard as you, but it doesn't matter. Encouraging one another so that we don't obtain God's wrath, but his salvation. Can you think of anything that would be easier to encourage someone to look forward to than God's salvation? Is that so tough? Is that a heavy lift to say, hey, when we're working and doing God's will, we're avoiding God's retribution and we'll receive salvation instead? It's not a big stretch to say that's an encouraging thought. That's a positive. And that's something we can do. I don't know that we have to word it just like that, but it can be a word of, you're doing a great job and you're being a good influence on others. And I liked your Bible class of the day because I saw this lesson. And I appreciate that you are willing to help with the little kids in the classes downstairs. And it's nice that someone helps take care of the building. And it's nice that there's some visitation that's going on. And I heard you were over at so-and-so's house, and I know you didn't do it, so I would say this, but I just want to tell you, I'm grateful to you for seeing to that other brother or sister's need. You can still do it as if you are not doing it for the praise of men, but that doesn't stop us from giving someone an encouraging word when we see good things happen. That's not condemned. That, in fact, is encouraged.
It'd be tempting to think that this knowledge of God's destined us for salvation in Jesus Christ, well, that ought to be motivator enough. Why do you need help when you've got that knowledge? But he immediately follows it up with encourage one another. So even with the knowledge that this salvation is ours, and that should be such a motivating thing, God doesn't expect you to be fully self-motivated and self-driven in that. He expects Christians to encourage one another. I think about times when I've been frustrated, feeling like I'm not making progress in my work, and I might talk to a coworker and they just voice that, they're having similar difficulties. We don't say one thing that helps each other fix our problems necessarily, but just the knowledge that you're not alone in the difficulties that you're facing can be a real help. Solomon would write in Ecclesiastes that if there's two, then when you fall, the other one can pick you up. And I think the help of keeping you on task, even if you're doing a good work, if you're doing it alone, you get tired of it and you feel like there's no feedback coming back, there's no response coming back to this good work. Is this accomplishing anything? But if you're doing it with a buddy, then you keep at it and you're motivated to keep at it longer. If nothing else, to not let them down. You're doing it with someone else. There's a little extra drive there. I've commented to several people, that I keep kicking myself to try to restart working on putting out some podcast episodes. I haven't done that since I did so with John. Doing it with a buddy keeps you on task. It keeps you motivated in doing that.
Andrew needs a buddy. I say Samantha would probably do a good job of that. Put her task on that. So, setting before our eyes and running the race with the prize of the upward calling. And Andrew says, how can that not be enough? And there's a very simple answer for that. Why is that not enough? Why is the admonition here to encourage? When your mind is fixed on salvation, why the admonition to encourage? Because we're just people. You can work and forget the reason you're working. You can be doing the right thing but lose track of why it is you're doing what you're doing, because it's become a good habit for you. But it may not be connecting with you in your thinking if you're not recalling that you're doing it because you want to please God and you want to show Him gratitude for how He's loved you. And you want to love people that aren't deserving because God loved me when I was not deserving. So it's only because we're forgetful, dumb people that we need this kind of encouragement. Some of us are dumber than others. Yes, ma'am.
The time that I was most encouraged, I think, maybe in my life, was after a tough surgery and several months of recuperating. I would venture to say that every woman here prepared meals, brought them all the way over to our home, and how much it meant to my family, and really even neighbors that saw what good things were done. It'll never be forgotten, and it was very encouraging.
Your neighbors had more visitors than usual, because I know I turned around a few times at people's driveways trying to find your house. But that's good, Pat. I mean, so our task is also just our daily burdens, and they can be physical burdens. They can be a lot of things. But what's the greatest healing power? The medicines we take or the mind? Sometimes the doctors even debate that, because we've seen people that are healed that don't have a medical explanation. And the mind can do tremendous things, and keeping that mind focused and looking positive. Yes, Gail.
Just to reconsider what Pat just said, I agree wholeheartedly with what she said. For the last 3 or 4 years, that Ann has not had good health. And how many times people came to our house with either cards or flowers or food. And finally it got so with the food we had time to stop. Because what we were doing was eating what we could and put the rest of it in the refrigerator. The refrigerator was about to bust the seams. a figure of speech. But I never know. I'll never be able to say completely how grateful we were. And in these last days, it's been repetition. I love every one of the people here. And they've treated me, they've treated us far better than we deserved. Oh, boy. Last week, so I don't know what I've done without them. I also want to tell you about today. We went out to Culver's for lunch. When I walked in, hadn't even got a chance to sit down yet. And Dee Dee Broderick was there. And when she saw me, she jumped up from the table and come over and give me a hug. And she saw Danny and Brian. And she greeted both them. We talked for a long time. And it was a pleasure meeting her, although we've not seen her here. Dee Dee still has a heart of gold. And she kept thanking me for things that I don't even know what she was talking about. But she felt a compassion, love for me, knew of Ann's death, and very sweet the whole time. Then when she got ready to leave, she stopped over at our table again and talked some more. She just very sweet thoughts, and I'm appreciative of her for that. Those are things that help too.
There's two in this room. I imagine about all of us know who I'm talking about, who have pulled extra duty in encouraging Ann and Gail. And we see that example. And we see that level of commitment. And that's encouraging too. There's plenty to be done. There's plenty of work to be done. And we all need to be engaged. We all need to be part of it. Because the work's important. Because the work is salvation rather than judgment. That's the work. Got a comment back here? Hebrews 10:24-25. Let us consider how to stimulate one another to love and good works, not forsaking our assemblies together as the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day near. Verse 23, let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. As Andrew pointed out a minute ago, verse 23 seems like an individual responsibility. Let us hold fast, each one of us, to the confession of our hope. But we will waver. It doesn't say that here, but that's the way we're made. That's the way we are. God is faithful to deliver on his promises, but we need to be encouraging one another. Because of 100 excuses as to why I can't do the work that's before me, why I can't seem to get something done. This is, I'm sure, no surprise to all of you. I am a procrastinator. I put things off. I don't know how many times Allison says, You know, you finally did something about that the other day, and I thought you'd forgot about it. I thought you didn't even remember that I had said that it was a problem. You waited so long before you did anything about it. I said, well, I was thinking about it. Just figuring out the best way I want to tackle the problem. She told me about the water pressure being low in the house, and I thought about it so long I forgot all about it. And since Aaron was at the house, I let him take care of that for me. He figured it out. We got good water pressure today. But we waver. It's not my goal to be disappointing to Allison when it comes to menial tasks that I can do to make the house run a little better. But I'm a procrastinator. I put it off. And I'll tell you another tendency, and that's one I suffer from as well. You can put things off so long that just no decision gets made. And that's really more like just shirking your responsibility. Sometimes we let the course of time make decisions for us that we should make ourselves. Before time dictates that the decision is no longer ours to make. It's our responsibility to what influence we can have on our lives and the lives of others to be engaged in that work. So let us stimulate one another to good works. It's been debated what day is approaching. As you see the day drawing near, maybe it's the day that your water pressure goes to zero in the house and you have to start sucking out of the faucet you want to drink. I don't know which day is approaching. But it's just a testimony to the fact that if some of us can do it tomorrow, then next week, Tuesday's better. And we need to be encouraged not to fall into that mode all the time. In the church, we are called out of the world and called into Christ, and hence to one another. I think this is good what the author has written here in this book. This is page 67. It's sad that some see the church only as something to put up with rather than as God sees her, the beautiful bride of his Son. And I think when Wilson writes that, he's not talking about in the collective, he's talking about the individuals. We've got those in the church that we maybe consider, more of the fashion of the bride of Christ. But there's others that we just let drop off the table. They're not in our mind. She's depicted as Christ's body and God's family, a special group of believers who love each other. If each local church practiced the one another admonitions, that's the entire quarter here, think of the growth experience that we would see spiritually in America. So we have some that are so good at this. We have some that are so talented at encouraging other people and pull people into the things that they're working on. And we have some that just don't want to dirty our hands. And the multiplier effect, it's a compounding number. And if you're not a math fan, don't worry about it. But it grows in an exponential fashion when you have more people that are involving more people that are involving more people. It's not a linear progression. It's a curve, and it's an upward curve when we do that. By this, all men will know that you are my disciples. John 13. Well, wouldn't we be left alone more? Wouldn't we stay out of trouble more if all men didn't know we were Jesus' disciples? Jesus' disciples kind of had a rough go of it, didn't they? Especially in the first century. A new commandment I give you, that you love one another, even as I have loved you, and that you also love one another. By this all men will know that you're my disciples, if you have love for one another. So maybe my statement earlier is wrong. Maybe the first century had as much anger and hostility and selfishness as what we see today. Because Jesus said this will be an identifying feature of my disciples. They'll actually do things for one another. They'll actually help each other out. And they'll encourage others to be part of it. We can do this. We are doing this. Don't get me wrong. We are doing this. But we can do more. There's some great encouragers, as I said. But we've got room for more. And more engagement of some whose workload is not as heavy as others. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I was thinking about your statement about that, and I think that in most congregations and places, the one another thing is, we're safe with that. But where we need to branch out and maybe step out of our box is that by this all men will know. Mm-hmm. After being in teaching for over 30 years, and I've dealt with children and parents and grandparents and trauma and fear, when adults feel loved, heard, valued, they don't hurt people. They want to spread that very thing. So the answer is what the main idea of the Bible is, and that is love. And sometimes that's the hardest thing, is to go out and love. Look where Jesus went. I don't think he stepped out of his comfort box, but maybe he stepped out of ours. But I will tell you that doing for those that maybe are uncomfortable. I have seen people, I have friends who are working with some people that we would run from. And these people are in tears because they didn't ever have anyone that loved them. They certainly didn't believe God loved them because the way they grew up or something. And just finding out that God does love them, but despite what the world has told them, has made a wonderful difference. And we can do that.
Yes, we can. We are sending. We've got big billboards that maybe we aren't aware of, and people are looking at these advertisements for Christianity. And you can see and hear the people that say nothing but a bunch of hypocrites. They're just nothing but a bunch of bigots and racists and homophobes and just put whatever you want on the list. But then you also have, when it comes right down to one-on-one interactions, you've got a great, great opportunity to be that which Jesus said, I'm not going to be able to stay here forever and handhold you guys. And where I'm going, I'm preparing for you. But you're going to have to step it up. And people are going to come to know that you are my people by the way that you treat one another. I think the thing I've noticed several times is you'll see some figure that you think is really a disrespectful individual, someone who seems to be all about themselves, maybe even someone of some notoriety or fame, and you'll see a picture of them and they'll have the cross hanging on the chain. And then sometimes it's a horrible thing to do, but you read on news stories and all, you read those comments that people post, those things are horrible, let me tell you. But you read those and someone will say, well, look, they're wearing a cross around their neck and they act like that. What a bunch of hypocrites. That's why I won't be part of the church. That's why I think God is dead. If these are his people, I don't want anything to do with it. So we have to combat that. We do. Okay, we'll pick up in lesson 12. You might say bottom of page 67. And like I said, I think I'll finish this lesson and then try to do a recap. Then I'm trying to hand off to Aaron so he can take the class. But he's got to give me a date we can do that. Okay? Thank you all for your contributions.